Okay, welcome to Chapter 3. So Chapter 3 is on the Malware Deployment, page 49. So introduction, why are we doing this? You know, the virus has to be able to reach its destination through some sort of a vector. And hackers spend an awful lot more time trying to get under the radar, stealth. They spend probably more time than that than developing whatever the payload is. The payload is ransomware, information stealer, because they have to sneak in the gate first. So that's the tough part, sneaking in the gate. Writing the software that does the information stealing and writing the software that does encryption, you can do that in a minute or two. So back in the old days, I remember we talked about the sneaker net where people would walk around with floppy drives. That was the way you passed stuff back and forth. Although obviously those days are gone. And so maybe we're talking about the word vector, malware vectors. And so they talk about on page 51, the vectors, how it spreads, and who or what is responsible for the distribution and proliferation of this thing. So a threat ecosystem, good term, talks about the collection of technologies that are available to the attacker. In other words, I can use email, or I can use a browser, or I can use a PDF file, or I can use whatever. So this threat ecosystem. So there's dimensions of a vector. These don't get hung up on these terms. Basically, we're talking about if a vector is going to be successful for me being a malware writer, here's what it needs to be able to do. It needs to be speed. In other words, remember we talked about how the difference between a worm and and a file infector, where worms happen immediately, require no human intervention. So do I want to do that? Do I want to have something that's worm based, or do I have to wait for somebody to click on something? So the slow physical speed of waiting for a human versus email or some link in some web page where it happens immediately. An air-gapped system. Ooh, what's that? Well, if you're in a super secret squirrel kind of a scenario where you have to keep things straight, you probably don't have your machine connected to the internet at all. It's completely isolated. That way you eliminated practically all the modern vectors nowadays. Just disconnect it from the internet and you're perfectly safe. You might not be able to get a lot of work done, but that's not the point for these machines. Okay. So the web changed everything. When the web came out and people could download whatever the heck they want, click on whatever they wanted, ads and pop-ups and download. We just downloaded an application. I assume when we went to GitHub and pulled this thing down that the guy was honest and we actually got what we were supposed to get and didn't get any malware thrown in there. But do I really know? A lot of this is just kind of reputation based. Okay, so stealth. Stealth is that component where I spend an awful lot of time as a malware writer because I need to be able to get it to your machine. It won't do me any good whatsoever if it gets blocked by your antivirus and I just wasted my time. So the whole idea is bypassing your existing security. That's the whole idea. Find a way to sneak in. And that's the most important thing to a malware. You've probably heard of a thing called a zero-day exploit where somebody found some vulnerability somewhere and has been using it, and yet there is no patch yet. A 0 day means it's already in the wild, it's already being used. So this is an example of stealth. I found a brand new thing that no one else has found, and I'm using that to my advantage as a malware writer. And there'll be a week, maybe a couple of days before whoever, Microsoft, Adobe, Oracle, whoever, patches the thing. So I have a very short window of time that I can attack as many machines as I want. Okay, cool. And so I will tell you that if you're a researcher and you find a 0 day exploit and can kind of sort of do a demonstration, you can get paid by turning that in like a bug bounty, a 0 day exploit bounty. You can let's just pretend Microsoft. You could go to Microsoft and say, I think I found something that you might be interested in. Would you be willing to pay for this information? And typically the answer is yes. Now, I will confess, the Russian hacker mob would probably pay more. But if you're trying to be an ethical person, this kind of makes sense, right? Okay. And then, even if I'm air-gapped and I'm not connected to the network at all, I mean, I walk around with a USB flash drive in my pocket. So is that safe? Can I just plug it into any machine anywhere? I will tell you, in my server room back in the day, we used putty, and we puttied up the front USB ports on the servers so that no one could walk in and, without anyone looking, just plug something in there. Now, we had keyboards and mice, but they were all, virtual through a KVM switch. Don't worry what all that means. So the front-facing, we didn't do that to the back, but the front-facing ports were usually plugged. Sometimes it was just, a piece of tape, or a little rubber plug, and sometimes it was, I've heard of people, a super squirrel scenario using super glue. I mean, I didn't do that. Okay. So again, it doesn't matter how good your perimeter is on your network. If they're gonna walk into your machine, sit at your desk, and plug something into your machine. I've had salesmen, walk up and say, "Let me show you this." And I go, "Stop! No, you cannot plug your USB drive into my machine. You want to bring your own machine, fine, but you're not plugging it into mine." You have to kind of be vigilant on this thing. Okay, so are USB flash drives allowed at Fort Hood on government computers? No. They have it turned off so that storage driver doesn't load. Okay, so in addition to crazy things like putting tape or glue or something on there. Okay, the next thing talks about coverage on page 53. So you could just send out your malware to everybody on the planet and just hope that, maybe 1 or 2% of them are going to be stupid enough to click on stuff. By the way, is that useful? Does that work? Can you really say, I'll send it out to 1,000 people and expect 10 to click on something they're not supposed to click on? Oh yeah, big time. So that's what's called an opportunistic attack, where you just send things out and hopefully somebody's dumb enough to do what to fool them. Okay? Now, let's talk about the cost of this. First of all, let's say you're at home and you have, Spectrum as your internet service provider. Are you allowed to do mass mailers from your Spectrum email? No. I don't know what the number is, but they would detect if you send out like 1,000 emails. They come back and say, this is a residential account. If you want to do this, you're going to need to do a business account. So they're going to catch on to that trick really quickly. But on the other hand, you can go to these companies that are mass mailing companies. Now you got to pay. I mean, it's not much. I don't know. I'm making this up, but $30 or $40 for $30 a month. You send your email to them and they blast it out to anybody you want, to as many people as you want. Okay, that's how you get spam. It's not because they're sitting at home on their private, home-based internet service provider. No, they're probably either going to a third party or they have a business account. Okay, and one more time, what's the cost of this? Practically nothing. At home, what's it cost to send an email? Zero. From a mass mailer perspective, what's it cost? I don't know, $30. So what's my chance of getting my $30 investment returned? Probably pretty high, because people you're gonna fool some people. You're gonna do it. 1,000 people, probably 10 at least. At least 10 are gonna be fooled. So it's relatively inexpensive to do mass mailers and quite frankly profitable. That's why most of these malware writers are there. They're not doing it for shits and giggles. They're doing it for money. Okay, and the opposite of an opportunistic attack is a specific attack. I'm going after the head honcho. I'm going after the system administrator. I'm going after the CEO. I'm going after somebody with the keys to the kingdom. Somebody who has information that I need. Not some poor smo sitting in some cube farm somewhere. I need a specific thing. Or you could attack a specific device, like a router or a firewall, those kinds of things. So an example we're going to talk about a great deal was Target in 2022? I don't remember. Target had a massive breach, and one of the pieces of the puzzle that they did was they sent a targeted email to one particular person that they kind of suspected had credentials, and it launched a key logger, and then they just sat back and waited for that person to log into the Target network system, and now they had a name and a password they could use. So the good example, we are going to talk about this example a lot. And by the way, if I sit down, let's say I'm corporate America, or I'm university, and I see that every single student got an email that was identical, wouldn't it be fairly obvious this was spam? I mean, if I was an email administrator, I'd probably go, no way, delete, right? I wouldn't even open it. If you sent it to everybody in the external email, sent to every student in the entire list, bullshit, I'm deleting it. Now, quite frankly, Microsoft Exchange is probably smart enough to do that on its own. But if I send it to only like three people that I think are going to have the keys to the kingdom that I need, the names and the passwords and things of that nature, is that going to be something easy for me to spot? No. So a surgical strike is harder to detect than an opportunistic one, right? Cool. Okay. Shelf life on page 54. I really want my virus to be out there for a long period of time. Now, I don't really have any control over that as a malware writer. So we're talking about the time it takes a 0-day exploit, how long it takes for you to patch your system. Now, I remember I was telling you a story about Slammer, and the army came running down to my office going, hey, you need to install this patch, quick. And I went, you mean the patch that came out 6 months ago? Well, of course I installed it. What are you talking about? What have you been doing? So even though it may not be a 0-day exploit from a classical sense, if you're not vigilant and you're not patching, well then, shoot, the shelf life of the software could last forever. It's kind of sort of up to you. You're the one's causing the problem. Okay, I'm going to say that again. You're the one that's causing the problem with shelf life. Okay, so after that 0-day exploit thing is over, it's up to you to patch. Okay, just saying. Now, Windows Update, when Windows 10 came out, about halfway through the Windows 10 cycle, they said, okay, we're going to make sure that all security software updates are mandatory. And everybody went, oh no, the sky is falling, we can't have that. No, it's going to disrupt my blah, 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 blah. There was an awful lot of hue and cry over, oh no, you can't do that, I don't want that. Well, to tell you the truth, and a lot of people would say, well, look, I don't have anything on my machine, so I'll just take the risk. I just use it for doing, Facebook. That's the only thing I use it for. You're kind of sort of missing the point. The point here is that you might not have anything on your machine that you care about, but if your machine got taken over by a bot and it was used to attack my machine, well, then you're just as guilty. Now, don't be so narrow-minded to think, well, I'm not going to wear a seatbelt because I drive really carefully. No. Everyone should wear a seatbelt. Everyone should patch. There's no excuse for you not patching. You can't say, well, I'm not doing anything important on my machine, so I don't need to patch. Bullshit. Again, the problem is you. Okay? The problem is you. So it's really basically a game, the shelf life thing, the time between release of my thing and the patch. And hopefully, if I'm a malware writer, I hope that you are lazy and don't patch. Woohoo! That'd be great for me. Okay, the next thing to talk about is the type of vectors. We kind of sort of covered that before. Physical media, email, instant messaging, social, Okay, so the vector is important. We talked about this before because it tells me how the system got infected. If I know how it is infected, I could probably come up with a very quick remediation. Even if I don't understand what the virus does, how it works, where it came from, I don't care. If I can figure out how it got there, I can immediately go to the firewall and turn it off, or go to the email server and turn it off. I can take steps long before any patches come up. Okay? So maybe I don't even know if there's a patch or not. I'm totally unaware, but if I know how it got here, I can tweak the firewall, tweak the Exchange server, or whatever else there is to prevent it from doing any more damage in my system. And then when the patch comes out, I can remediate. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark as usual. So you know how this goes.